Hi, welcome back to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. Today I wanted to show you a couple of different designs which are really simple and easy little mini projects in and of themselves, and you can use them to enhance all kinds of designs in your wirework jewellery and art decor that you may be working on. So they're both kind of floral in their aspect, which we're going to look at to begin with. I'm going to work today with antique bronze colour coated copper wire in a 0.8mm gauge. You could easily work in a 1mm gauge as well, and if you were going to be making these up into rings, for instance, you'd probably want to go for the slightly heavier gauge of wire. So to begin with, I'm going to show you a design much like this, which is kind of a floral design. Now I've completed the circuit on this one, so you can just wire that onto things, but if you leave yourself some extra tails of wire on the back rather, you could very easily make that into a cocktail ring and add some gemstones into the design. So I'm going to just warm through my 0.8mm gauge wire to begin with. I'm going to use my round ring mandrel, and I'm going to wind it around so that I've got 6 circuits on the mandrel. So that's 3, 4, 5, and let's have a look. That's only 5, so I need to get that up to 6. Flip that over the other side. Have we got 6? Yes, we have. Now the reason I'm going for an even number is the way that this particular design works. If you have an even number of petals on your flower, it makes it easier to look slightly symmetrical when you spread that open. Play around with the design yourself and see what the differences are when you use an odd number of circles at the beginning of the design, and you'll see that it gives you a slightly different feel to the design. But I'm going to go for quite symmetrical today, and that's why I've got the 6 circles. Doesn't matter if it's 8 or 10, even if you want it to be incredibly detailed. So first thing I'm going to do is just flip that over so we can look at the 2 tails. I might need a little bit more spare wire, so I'm just going to draw that down the mandrel and tighten that up, pulling those in opposite directions so that I can see that I have still got those 6 circles of wire, but I've got a little bit more slack on either end. I was working with probably around about 12 to 14 inches of wire. Could have done with maybe a little bit more to make a larger flower design. So what I'm going to do to begin with is take a right angle over the central section. If you imagine that we were making a ring with this, I've gone across the body of the ring and in exactly the same way in the opposite direction, so that your 2 tails are crossing over that round section that we have created. I'm just going to draw those together nice and tightly and move the mandrel out of the way. So what I'm going to do is take one of those tails all the way through the design. If it was a ring, that's where it's going to go. So the wire has crossed over and it's going to come back inside the design. So I'm going to use my pliers to help me just bring that into position and then continue on in the same direction it was going. And what we've done now is we've secured the size of our design. So if I just take the other tail and wrap that around the little section that we have already passed through and back in the same direction, I'm just going to take the other wire all the way around, so we've just tied in a knot. Now these you could either trim off like I did on this piece, they're just cut and tucked, or you can just leave those hanging around for the moment and you can use those to wire onto a headpiece or whatever you want to work with. Now if we were to open this out now, I'm going to choose 3 on one side, 3 on the other side and open it out. You would make a lovely bubbly round flower design. So I'll just take those tails out of the way for a second. I'll show you what I mean. It's a little bit like a daisy. So you could open that out like so, which is quite pretty in and of itself. That's a lovely feature that you can use. But what I'm going to do is just bring those back to the centre for a second, as if we hadn't undone them. Pop them back up to the middle. I'm just going to pop them back onto the mandrel. So I've shown you the first floral design, which is like the round petaled daisy. I'm just going to reset this. So we haven't done anything with it yet. Give it a nice little bit of a jiggle to get it back to round. And I'm going to use now some flat facing pliers with quite a broad aspect to them, but they are indeed flat. And if we imagine that this is the 6 o'clock on the clock face, I want to go to the 12 o'clock on the clock face with one edge of those pliers. Just getting that into position. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that into a slightly pointed shape. So that's one side. If you open that out, you'll get a one-sided petal. But I'm going to do that on both sides. So slot the flat pliers back in and give that a squeeze, so that we have got that lovely petal or leaf shape that we often work with, but we've got it 6 times over, connected at the base. I'm just going to push that out of the way for a second. And if we then open them back up, again, I've got 3 on one side and 3 going to the other side. Pull those down. What I might do is just trim these tails away because they're making it visually difficult to see what's happening. So you could keep those to wire them onto things if you'd like. Trim that away, and then you just give that a bit of a squeeze to tie everything in so it doesn't come undone, like so. Back to the face of the design, and we're just going to open those out, just tease them out gently so that you get those petals of your flower kind of straight away. Now these do look lovely when you layer them up, so you can add some depth and dimension to these. At the moment it's quite flat if you look at it sideways. But if you wanted to add some 3D aspects to it, what you can do is draw one of the petals up, put a bit of a curve on it, and then a little bit of an upturn on the petal like so. You can do that with all of them, some of them, or every other one, whatever takes your fancy. Just add a little bit of depth to the design and you suddenly get a much more 3D feeling. Many flowers are a bit more 3D. And they have sort of curvature to the leaves. So you could very easily take a scrap piece of finer gauge wire and wire one over the top of another, alternating the shapes of the petals. So that is my first floral design to show you, which, as I say, you can pop these, you can just build them up, pop them on headpieces or on tiara bands or whatever you want to do. And they make really attractive additions to your designs. There is a tutorial on this channel for making a leafy vine work. And if you pop one of these every couple of inches or so, it adds a really nice decorative detail. If you're making photo frames, for instance, then some vine work with some floral art on it really adds some depth and interest. The second design I want to show you is mildly inspired by the Padparadscha flower, the Lotus blossom. So I'm just going to pop a couple of examples down onto the board, which are these. And I really love working with these, and there's so many different things you can do. Instead of these little coils, which I'm going to show you today, you can add another leaf that comes down beneath them. If you were to use a search engine, you would very easily find plenty of images of the Padparadscha blossom or lilies on a pond or anything that takes your fancy, and you can try to replicate it a bit more accurately. But for me, I just wanted something that was reminiscent of the lotus blossom. So again, for this example, I'm going to work with a 0.8mm gauge wire, which is the same as this one. Now this independently as a brooch would probably be too floppy and it might get caught and bent. So if I was making it for a brooch, I would probably want to go for a 1mm or a 1.25mm gauge just to up the ante slightly. So I'm just going to pop those to the side for now. And I'm going to warm through the wire that we're looking to work with. So for this design, I'm going to use my bent chain nose pliers, and I'm going to start approximately in the middle, just because it's easier for me to kind of ascertain where I'm going. And what we're going to do is make a series of 5 kind of bowling pin shape pieces. So I'm starting at the pointed tip of the blossom. So I'm just going to draw that around like so. It looks a little bit like a fish, I guess. But you can choose whatever kind of shape that you want to make, but that's going to be each of the individual pieces that we're going to recreate. So where the 2 wires cross over at the base of the design, I'm going to grip that quite firmly and then bring up sharp angles each time. So I just need to do this 5 times and try to replicate that shape as closely as you can. Again, if you wanted to, you could refer to a piece of paper. It looks a little bit like an eye in some instances. But I'm just going to make 5 of these rather quickly and then show you how to finish off the design. So we've got 2. I'm just going to make them quite simply and roughly. You would definitely want to take a little bit more time just to ensure that you have a slightly more even and repetitive design. Because if you take the time to make them more repetitive, the finished piece will look much more aesthetically pleasing and much more like you cared. So just each time I'm coming to the end, I'm using the bent chain nose pliers because they've got a reasonably fine tip. I'm just holding that while I form each of those shapes. And I'm just switching from side to side until I've got a similar amount of wire left over on each end. So I think we've got 4 complete ones so far. So I'm just going to keep going until I have used up all of my wire. Again, it was about 12 to 14 inches or so. Draw that across, and because we pre-warmed it, it's working quite nicely. So if I just hold this sideways and open it out, it's a little bit springy, but we've got 5 of those little petal designs. Let me just hold it down here. And they're vaguely similar. You would take a little bit more time to make sure that they were a little bit more regular. So I'm just going to line those up and try and get a sharp enough point at the top there, and just twist ever so slightly so that you get a more defined point. So I'm just gripping at the top there and drawing that over ever so slightly. You could even, if you wanted to, just pinch that slightly together, making sure that the tails cross over at the base. So I'm just going to trim away a little bit of excess wire on either side, trying to get those tails approximately the same length. And just for ease of use, I'm just going to put some coils on here, which you can flip over in a moment. So a coil on one side with that tail, just loosely coiling them for the time being, coil on the other side, and just bring those up into position. As I say, you could use much more wire and then ensure that you had enough for some leaves. And now what we're going to do is just open these out. So you can, if you'd like to, just apply a little bit of work hardening to each of them in turn, just by capturing them between your pliers like so. But all we're going to do with this design, I've got it upside down at the moment, is just open them out little by little, and one of the petals comes away at once until it sits like so. And almost by magic you get this almost like a peacock tail arrangement, or the padparadscha, and then you can just flip those coils over however you want them to appear to make you happy. Let's just flip that one over. You can tie them in a knot as well if you desire, or just use a little bit of finer wire just to get those to sit. But that's a simple, easy idea. Doesn't use much wire, and it's quite a neat little individual project. You can use those however you want to enhance your other designs. As I say, 2 simple, easy floral projects for you today. Thank you very much for watching.